Hello minions, the book that we will be reading for a little while is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Many of you may have already read this book or even watched the movie, but we will be going through it much more thoroughly, so don't worry about reading it again. This series is separated into 3 parts, so without further ado, let's start part 1, chapters 1 to 11. Ba-bam, bam, ba-bam, ba-bam. Ba-bam. Chapter 1 starts with introducing Charlie's family. When Charlie is first introduced, the narrator says, "This is Charlie. How do you do? He is pleased to meet you." Already from the first few pages, we get the sense that Charlie is very, very polite. After introducing the family, the narrator goes on to say the next important description of his family, which is that they are extremely poor. Not only are they unbelievably poor, there are 7 people living in this dreadfully small house with 4 grandparents sharing 1 bed. In fact, the level of their poverty is so extreme and ridiculous that it almost has a comical feel to it. Although being poor is difficult, the family doesn't necessarily seem unhappy, at least not all the time. In chapter 2, the narrator says that the family every night forgets that they are even poor. So, question 1. How do the family forget that they are poor? There is a very specific part in chapter 2 that you may have to find. Ba-bam! Now there is Willy Wonka and his chocolate factory. Willy Wonka is set to make the best chocolates in the world. And by now we already know that Charlie loves chocolate more than anything. But one day there is crazy news. Willy Wonka has decided to let 5 children come tour his factory. This is such a big news because no one has entered or left the factory in years ever since Willy Wonka let go of all of his workers due to people stealing his recipes. Now, Charlie is as excited as any other children, thinking that he has a chance of being one of the 5. The problem, however, is that in order to be one of the 5, you must win a golden ticket from buying a chocolate bar. Question 2. Why does Charlie have such a low chance of being one of the 5 children? Ba-bam. Okay, the first 2 children have won their tickets. The first is Augustus Gloop, who eats many chocolates every single day. The second is Veruca Salt. Her father is extremely rich and has bought thousands of chocolates so that she can just win this ticket. And here, we start to feel an important theme of this book: the rich and the poor. Clearly, it seems that rich kids have a much higher chance of winning a golden ticket. And this is obviously not only true in the book, but in our world as well. So as a question 3, I want you to write one example of how rich kids or rich people have a better chance in life than poor people. Think about education, community, or even nutrition, like the food that we eat. Ba-bam! The last thing I want to go over from part 1, chapters 1 to 11, is the theme of parenting. It seems that with the exception of Charlie, all the children who won the golden ticket have parents that just don't care about their misbehavior. Augustus's mom seems to never care about Augustus eating chocolate every single day, which has inevitably led to him being severely obese. Veruca's father always seems to give her whatever she wants, no matter how unreasonable her wants are, which has led to her being completely spoiled. Charlie, on the other hand, living a life where his parents can't give him any of these things, is considered a hero, as the narrator puts it. Charlie is thankful for receiving a single chocolate bar for his birthday, and even offers to share it with the rest of his family. In another instance, when he finds the money from the street, he decides to only spend a small portion of it for himself so that he can give the rest to his mom. As the book goes on, we will continue to see Charlie's virtuous traits like generosity and politeness, which leads to his success. Ba-bam! Alright, thank you so much for watching, guys. That is part 1. Make sure to download the full worksheet from the link in the description below and read chapters 12 to 21 as part 2 before watching the next video. Bye-bye! Alright, part 2, chapters 12 to 21. Many fascinating things have just happened, so let's talk about it. Ba-bam, bam, ba-bam, ba-bam. Ba-bam. Okay, so part 1 ended with Charlie finally finding the golden ticket. It was also very important timing as the family was experiencing a very rough time, even worse than their usual poor life. When Charlie comes home and shows the family the golden ticket, the entire family is flabbergasted. For a few seconds, they're just completely still and cannot even respond. Then, when they finally find out that it really is the golden ticket, Grandpa Joe flies out of the bed and starts dancing like a child. Pretty significant considering he never leaves his bed. Luckily for him though, he is the one that gets chosen to go with Charlie to the factory. Question 1. How was Grandpa Joe chosen to go with Charlie? Ba-bam! Alright, the big day is here! The 5 children and their guardians are at the gates of this iconic factory. Now, the crew hasn't entered the building yet, but the children already show signs of misbehavior. Despite the fact that it's not 10 o'clock yet, the children are so impatient that they try to climb over the fence to get to the other side. And in chapter 14, Willy Wonka finally makes an appearance in the book as he checks the tickets and the names of the children. He seems to dislike the name Veruca from the start. He says her name sounds like a wart at the sole of your foot or something. I don't know, I thought that was a little bit strange. Now all 5 of the children are checked and ready to go. Willy Wonka ushers everyone inside. But as he does so, he says something very strange. Something that hints that something bad is going to happen throughout this tour. So question 2. What does Willy Wonka say that suggests that bad things will happen? Ba-bam! Chapter 15, they are in the chocolate room, which by the description of the narrator seems to be the most beautiful room of the entire factory. The crew is absolutely astonished by the chocolate river as well as the colossal waterfall, which Willy Wonka says that is crucial for making good chocolate. Silly Wonka, right? Next, of course, we have to talk about the Oompa-Loompas from Loompa Land. The book describes the Oompa-Loompas as these tiny people that work at the factory. Now, we know that they can't leave the factory because we learned that nobody has gone in or come out of the factory for years. Now, that doesn't seem like something anyone would want to do. Could you imagine staying in one building forever? I would go crazy. So question 3. How did Willy Wonka get the Oompa-Loompas to come and work for his factory? Ba-bam! Now, in later parts of the book, we learn that the Oompa-Loompas actually may be slaves. But we'll get to that a little bit more in part 3. But as of the beginning of chapter 16, Willy Wonka already hints that the Oompa-Loompas might be slaves, saying that the Oompa-Loompas were imported from Oompa Land. The word import is a word that we use for things that are bought from a different country because your country doesn't have a lot of that stuff or doesn't have it at all. For example, most of USA's bananas come from southern countries like Ecuador or Colombia because it's very hard to grow bananas in the United States. So the fact that the Oompa-Loompas were imported does give us a little bit of a sense that they might be slaves. But Willy Wonka does say that they are paid to work at the factory, so maybe they're just workers. Ba-bam! In chapter 17, the first child falls out of the crew. By drinking out of the chocolate river, which he isn't allowed to do because the river cannot be contaminated by human hands, he falls into the river and gets sucked up the tube. The first thing that I thought was a little bit ridiculous was how the chocolate river stays clean in the first place. It just left out in the open without anything to cover it up. Like, what if a bug falls into it? Anyways, the worst happens where it's not just a hand, but a full human falls into the river. I really hope Willy Wonka didn't sell those chocolates. Question 4. What is the lesson to be learned from Augustus's downfall? Ba-bam! Alright guys, that is part 2. Make sure to download the full worksheet from the link in the description below. And for homework, read the rest of the book, chapters 22 to 30. Bye-bye! Hello minions, welcome to the third and final part of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Let's get started. Ba-bam! Bam! Ba-bam! Ba-bam! Ba-bam. Part 2 ended with Violet taking and eating a gum that she wasn't supposed to that made her blow up into a blueberry. Similar to Augustus, another child fails to listen to instructions and falls out of the group. So at this point, we start to understand that this tour is a survival game where the child with the most patience will stay till the end, and by the looks of it, we're getting a pretty good idea that Charlie is going to be the winner. In chapter 22, the remaining crew members zoom through many doors. Like the crazy chocolatier Willy Wonka is, there seems to be hundreds of rooms all with very silly names. My favorite room has always been the fizzy lifting drinks. Let me know what you think. Question 1. Which room would you want to go inside the most? You can choose any room for the entire book. There is actually a very big list from the elevator buttons. Ba-bam! Okay, before we move on, there has been a few hints that the Oompa-Loompas might be slaves. It turns out that the Oompa-Loompas are not only just workers working at the factory, but they're also the test subjects who try these dangerous prototypes of the candies. For example, when Violet turns blue from eating the gum, Willy Wonka says, "Oh, yes, that's always where they get it wrong, the blueberry." He says he has tested the gum many times on the Oompa-Loompas, and every single time they turn into these giant blueberries. How many Oompa-Loompas has he turned into blueberries? Also, when Willy Wonka talks about the fizzy lifting drinks, He says that you can never try them outside as there is no ceiling to catch you. He says once there was an Oompa Loompa that tried it outside and he just flew into the air and never came back down. So question 2. Do you think the Oompa Loompas are slaves, or do you think they are just happy workers? I mean, they do sing a lot, and Willy Wonka does say that they are happy most of the time, so maybe they're just ordinary workers. Ba-bam. Okay, so there is a very short and not so important chapter in this book, but it's really funny, so let's just go over that very quickly. Square sweets that look round. If you didn't understand the joke, it's a little bit sad because jokes are never really funny when you explain it, but I will just explain it just in case. So the sweets are square in shape, but they have eyes that look around. They look around, so the pun is the round and around, so square sweets that look around. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha. Ba-bam. So since we have a pretty good idea that Charlie is going to be the winner of the tour, we're just waiting to see how the remaining 2 falls out of the group. And since the story of Augustus and Violet has been that they have fallen out due to their specific misbehavior, Augustus with his love for chocolate and Violet with her love for chewing gum, we can kind of predict that Veruca's downfall will have something to do with her not getting what she wants, and Mike something to do with television or guns. So, Veruca. The crew is now in the nut room, and Veruca is fascinated by the squirrels and demands that she wants one to her father. Typical Veruca. When she is repeatedly denied of getting one of these squirrels, she bursts open the door and goes inside. Something Willy Wonka pleaded not to do. Now, the job of the squirrels is to test if the nuts are hollow or full. The confused squirrels do the same thing with Veruca's head and determines that it is hollow. Question 3. Why is this so funny? Ba-bam. Okay, since we're running out of time a little bit, we'll talk about Mike TVs very, very quickly. Willy Wonka has created a camera which can cut a chocolate into 1,000,000 pieces and then send it through the air into the antennas into the TVs of the people. Obviously, this is ridiculous, as Mike, the TV expert, says. But nothing is ever ridiculous in this chocolate factory, and I mean in Roald Dahl books in general. Okay, long story short, Mike doesn't listen and decides to go in front of the camera with hopes of being on TV. He succeeds, but at the cost of becoming terribly small. Okay, I think we're generally done with the plot of the book. Let's get into the essay. Ba-bam. So, although Charlie is the main character for the first half of the book, once they go inside the factory, Charlie is actually quite quiet. He's just kind of being there, being calm, and really not doing much while all the other kids are going on a rampage. So in this essay, I actually want to focus on the other children, not Charlie. So this is the structure of the essay. You can find it in the description below. You're going to choose one child that is not Charlie. In the first part, I want you to talk about what kind of child he or she is. So in this section, you will discuss mostly about the things that happened before the chocolate factory. So mainly about when they found it, and we learn about what kind of child they are. Part 2, we'll talk about the downfall. What did they do that caused them to fall out of the group? And in the third and final section, I want you to talk about what is the lesson to be learned from their downfall. Ba-bam. Alright, thank you so much for watching, guys. That is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. See you next time with a new book. Ba-bam, bam. Ba-bam, ba-bam. Ba-bam, bam. Ba-bam, ba-bam. Ba-bam, bam. Ba-bam, ba-bam. Ba-bam.